Oh my God, he's so cute.
And
I
now
can't.
he's really
I'm
over
gonna
my shoulder.
spend the entire time just like staring at you. Welcome everyone to the Sophia Chang Show. I have such a special guest for you today. It is Mara Williams, who drafted her first novel in third grade on a spiral notebook, a love story about a golden retriever and the stray dog who admired her from beyond the picket fence. I am already dying of cuteness, and I really hope that gets published soon.
Yeah, any day now.
Now Mara writes about strong, messy women finding their way in the world. Mara is the author of The Truth is in the Detours, which just debuted, and The Epicenter of Forever. When not writing or reading, she can be found enjoying California's beaches, redwoods and trails with her husband, 3 kids, and disobedient dog. I beg to differ. Your dog has already won me over, and I hope that he appears and makes guest appearances.
Yeah. Oh, he'll have his moment. You'll see him. He's not always so well behaved. Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself. Like, what really happened between that amazing dog love story in grade school to the debut?
Yeah, that's such a good question. So, I've always written. So, as my bio states, I started writing as a little kid and wrote novels through grade school, high school, and college, and majored in English lit. But I think my early 20s, I think that sort of huge wave of doubt crept in, and also that fear of going for something that was such a huge dream. I think I let practicality get in the way. And while I had always written, I hadn't actually finished a novel. I've had book upon book in drawers that were half finished, 3/4 of the way through. And it wasn't until I established my career, had my family, and kind of got to that point in your life, especially as a woman, where I got over the fear of perfectionism and decided I'm going to do this. I'm going to finish a full novel, and actually, prove to myself that I could do it. And so that was many years later, about 7 years ago, actually, when I finished my first full length novel. And I thought, okay, this has a beginning, middle, and an end, and I can call it complete. And so that's really where my journey started, even though I'd never stopped writing. I'd never stopped wishing for it, but I kind of got to the point where I need to do more than wish for it and actually make it happen. So I wrote my first novel, I think it was about 2018, and kind of just pushed through and finished some version of a draft without getting trapped up in what had stopped me all along of this isn't good enough, this isn't perfect, this isn't as polished as I want to be, this doesn't look like the books that I see on my shelves. And what I didn't know at the time is almost nobody's first draft looks like something that's finished and on a shelf. So I just had to give
That's right.
myself permission to write something that could be terrible, that didn't have to be perfect, that I would then turn around and fix.
Was there a specific thing, like a moment of revelation, or what made you finally click and go, "That's it. We're gonna do this. Forget the perfectionism."
Yeah, I wish there was a one moment. I think it was just maturity, honestly. I think it was growing up and realizing by that point I'd had my children. They were getting a little bit older, and I had sort of realized enough to know that perfectionism is really boring. It's unattainable. It's such it's something that holds you back. And so I think there were a lot of moments as I got older that started to prove that to me. And it was really just a moment of quiet. My family was on a vacation. We were having a lovely time. And I was on the beach. I was going for a run, and I had this moment of clarity. I'm like, okay, if not now, when? Like, when am I going to finally feel ready to do this? And what's stopping me other than time and all those other things? I had a demanding job and kids and the dog and all of the things that do stop us. But that was it. It was just a, if not now, when. I was on a run, and I had this line of dialogue that just came into my mind, and I wanted to chase it. And so I came home from that trip and just sort of mentioned, I think, to my husband and my sisters, and like, would you think I was crazy if I just started to write a book, and I have a lovely family. They're like, "No, of course you should. Go for it." So it wasn't really an epiphany. It was like, I think sometimes when you get to a certain age, as a woman especially, you have to get back to yourself. You have to let like all the constraints of society and everything everybody's told you about and what you should be doing sort of fall away and figure out who you've always been and find a way back to that.
I just felt this bolt of electricity come through me when you said that. Oh my gosh, so relatable. The thing I love about having writers on the show is that, like, you guys say the most beautiful things. So, the reason why I was so excited to have you on is because you fit the ethos of this show so much, the no BS. Like, everything I read from you was so honest. You talked about the things that we all talk about privately, but you open the door wide open. It was almost like you let all the moths out, you let the light in. And I feel like every time we do that as writers, as people, and especially as women, it takes that shame away. It takes, and it just makes everything feel so much more connected. Now, oh my gosh, I relate to you. I understand you. You're literally speaking what I'm thinking. And so I've always appreciated that honesty of yours. And I remember the first time we talked, I was like, Mara, am I the loser of traditional publishing? What is going on? And then you told me your story, and it's like, it just makes us feel so much better. And so that's why I brought you on here so that we could bust some myths today, because there are so many assumptions about publishing. And I can tell you this, I'm just going to start by saying this. I went through Hollywood and I had an easier time making money there than I do in traditional publishing.
Oof.
And this was 20 years ago when it was still extremely racist and extremely whitewashed. And I booked the second audition that I ever went on. It was a commercial for 7 Up. I got into SAG instantly. I was paid at the union rate. Like, it wasn't easy. I went on tons of auditions I didn't make, but at least I was booking.
Yeah.
Traditional publishing is not like that. People think that, "Oh,
No.
you write this book. Oh, I finished the book. That's the hard part." I'm sorry to
Nope.
say, for people like you and me who write a lot, who could draft a lot of novels, that is not the hard part. So, yeah, let's help me bust this myth. Tell me exactly, because you said 7 years ago you began the journey. So 7 years, in that time, how many books is that?
Yeah. Well, first, I just want to say how sobering it is that you said that about Hollywood, because I think that is everybody knows how hard it is to make it in Hollywood. It's a cliche. It's well known at this point, but to hear it's actually harder in publishing, I don't have that other frame of reference. So that is sobering. So I started out 7 years ago, and in that span, I wrote queried, so sending queries to agents. Before I got my agent, I was on my sixth book. So I wrote, polished, edited, and tried to market at least three of those books. There were a couple that I wrote and they went straight in the drawer just because I knew they weren't ready, and I had other books that I was more excited about. But yeah, I didn't get my agent until my sixth book, and had tried with my second book. I had tried, I'd made somewhat of an effort to get an agent. And on my fifth book, I made a huge effort to get an agent, and it didn't end up panning out, even though, all the markers were that that was going to be my book. I had lots of full requests. I had lots of interest, but none of them actually panned out with an offer. And then it was on my sixth book where I received two agent offers. And so it was a lot. I mean, when I think about how many words I'm not sure how to think about, we think about a novel of about 100,000 words, more or less. But that's a lot of words to write and edit and polish and fall in love with. I think that's the hard part, is you fall in love with these characters, you fall in love with the book, to write and set aside. And I do think there's a lot of value in that. I would say I think it's hard sometimes, on the flip side, for some people to get the deal on their very first book, because for me, at least, I would be fearful, like, oh, did I only have one book in me? Do I know how to replicate this? Do I know how to do it again? So I think there is some value of having a lot of books under your belt before you get a deal and have to write under the pressure of publishing and the time frame. Um and it also took me several books to really figure out my voice and figure out what I should be writing, what I was best at, what I was most passionate about, what was uniquely mine, instead of maybe what had inspired me by other writers and other books. So I definitely think there's some value in having gone through and done all of that work But it is difficult to really stomach that, all of these books will not see the light of day. And, it is a goal of so many people to write a novel. But once you realize you've written a novel, that's just writing the end on the first book is barely the beginning. It's kind of the prologue of the journey, honestly. It's not, I'm not even sure I consider that where my journey began because, yeah, it feels so far away. It feels so far removed from how much work it took to get to the next step.
I wish I had known you when I first started writing when I first started trying to do this professionally over 10 years ago because I mean, I'm so happy that I know you now to hear you say this, but the stories like what I was surrounded by was seeing my peers and colleagues quickly finding success, hitting the agent right away and then going right to auction. Six-figure book deal, there we go. And so, yeah, I didn't hear these stories. To hear that this is actually more common than is advertised is very helpful for me even, not just everybody
Yeah.
out there who's still trying and in the trenches.
I mean, unfortunately I'm a little bit of, I wouldn't say I'm a pessimist by heart, but I am really cautious of I don't expect success, especially when it's me. And so, I read all the dire statistics. It's something like I've seen reported either you get an agent, getting an agent like 0.002% of the time, and I've seen it as low as 0.0005% of the time. And so I looked at those figures and looking at how many requests an agent receives, and you realize A, it's not a meritocracy. And it's so according to taste, which feels really unfair. But at the same time, this industry is all about taste. It's taste of the agent, of the editor, of once you get up to acquisitions, and then it's taste of the reader and whether your book actually falls in the hands of the right reader who is looking for a book like yours, who doesn't have some biases that might turn them against a book like yours, who actually is in the right headspace at the right time to read it and enjoy it and really absorb what the author is intending to say. So I think it's just, you hear time and time again, it's so subjective, but it's more than that. It's subjective, it's luck, it's timing, it's being in the right inbox at the right time. And I think I went into it knowing like this feels like this Herculean task to not only write a book, to finish a book, to find that needle in the haystack of an agent who is open and receptive to my book, my pitch, at the right time. And then to get to the next filter, which is an even smaller funnel, an editor who's looking for a book exactly like the one that you're writing at the particular times. I think, it's interesting your experience, I think, because you went through such a uh you it almost like you won the lottery with your first experience, right? Whereas I know a lot of people who have just been in the trenches for years, and then I was in a group of people on submission, and so had this like broad base of like big representative sample, and realized, okay, it's a little bit like winning the lottery when you get all the way through, and then once you get a book published, there's so many other barriers. um
The book that got me Reese's Book Club lit up and my agent is my 4th book. I actually started so like you, I'm late to the game. There's a lot of people who are 16 years old writing novels. I wouldn't have even known how to do that at 16.
yeah.
I was taking classes. I worked on the craft. I've been writing since I was 4 or 5 years old, but yeah, I wouldn't have even known how to complete a novel. I didn't complete a novel until NaNoWriMo, was my
Yeah.
first time, and then I did 3 novels, and yeah, like you, each one had some measure of success that let me know I was on the right track, but it was never any cigar. The first one was an Amazon breakthrough semifinalist back in the day when they had that contest. I'm like, "Oh, okay, good." Was panned by Publishers Weekly. They were super harsh back in the day. And
Oh,
then and then the second one, did get some full requests, won some pitch contests. The third one got super close. I was getting fulls from, like, really, really top agents, but, I also did not have this was over 10 years ago. I didn't have I think tenacity that
Mm,
age brings to you. You know, they always say that a
yeah.
lot of marathon winners are older because they know
Right.
how to it's just a mental thing. And then, life got in the way. I had to make money. And so
Yeah,
making money takes up all the time. And so
it does.
yeah, and so I didn't come back to it until after my illness and I became disabled. I went blind. I was in a wheelchair. The 2 things I love the most in life, dancing and writing, were taken away from me almost
Yeah.
overnight. And I didn't think I would be able to see or walk again, and both happened from years and years of chemo, lots of hard work and sweat, and I still get monthly infusions to keep the disease at bay, but there is some permanent damage already, and so but I'm seizing that moment. I think when that happened, when crises happen, and when you get to a certain age, crises have happened, and you realize you have no idea what's gonna happen tomorrow, and so you're like,
Right.
I can't mess around anymore,
Yeah.
and so that's when I was like, really went for it, and yeah, and that 4th novel hit it. I poured myself into it. So having that die on submission, I think, was so painful because I poured
Yeah.
everything into it, and it paid off. Reese's Book Club took note. Those people were like, "We can see this on TV now," and I was like, "Me too." My agent too was like, "This is the voice of the next, contemporary fantasy or the next generation," and I'm like, "I am," and then traditional publishing didn't agree, and so
Yeah.
yeah, and so like you, it's like book after book, you just keep churning it.
Yeah. Yeah. And what it has to come down to is the love of writing, because there will always be some barriers ahead, whatever it is, whether it's traditional publishing. That's such a cliche that the goalposts keep moving, but they really do. And I'm trying so hard to fight against that, where I'm trying not to look, keeping my eyes on my own paper, realizing that this is my journey. It's not anybody else's, and everybody's goes at a different pace. I have some friends who are on submission right now, and it's really hard. The weight, the not knowing, the eternal sort of, yeah, just hanging on. Your mental health resides on an email coming in. Um, and they're at the point where they're seeing other people get deals. And I just had a conversation with a friend yesterday, and I said, this is truly not a race, because there are folks that get out ahead, so to speak, and they get their deal right away, maybe on their first book, but they may struggle with their second or their third. They may underperform publishers' expectations, and then they have a hard time getting the next deal. Somebody else may get a really small deal or have to wait until the sixth, seventh, eighth book, but then they hit it big on the ninth, and then they jump out ahead. It's just, we're all in this together, and we all, at the end of the day, love books. We love reading. We love writing. We love making up worlds. And sometimes those worlds make it into the hands of readers, and sometimes they stay in our heads or in our drawers or in our computer files. And it's very hard to stomach. But in many ways, I'm really grateful that I did this when I was older. I don't think I could have handled it. I look at some of the 20 something writers. I'm like, how this is such a difficult industry to navigate, and just keep your own sense of self, your positivity, your hope. And it's really hard. I can't imagine when I wouldn't have been able to do it at my 20s. I would have been way too insecure and looking for that external validation that doesn't always come, and it certainly doesn't come consistently. And if you're too hung up on that external validation, if you're so pleased by a beautiful review, you can be just as crushed by a negative one. And they're both going to happen, because, again, this industry is about taste. What is one person's favorite book will be another person's least favorite book. And that's all it, comes down to. But also, for me, I don't think I could have written a book in my 20s, no matter how much like skill or craft I had, because I didn't have that much to say about the world. Some people do when they're younger. For me, I needed to live a little bit and hurt a little bit, and go through some stuff before I had a lot to say.
Some of the books that are with my agent are actually those original 3 books completely rewritten,
Oh,
and I look at them and
nice.
I'm like, "Oh my gosh, thank goodness." I would have been so embarrassed.
Yes.
Like,
Right?
how awful. I would have been like, "This is what people think my writing would be," but thank goodness
Yeah.
I have a chance now as a better writer to make them better.
Yeah. I just did that. I took a book. It was my second book I wrote, and I had an idea of a way to make it fuller, um, and completely rewrote it. And at first, I told my agent, I'm like, I think I need to sort of polish it because I'd sent her the pitch. And then I got into it. I'm like, no, this is a completely like going down to the foundation and rebuilding it from the ground up. And I'm so glad I did because I think there was what I noticed and just being kind to my former self, there was some beauty in it. And there were some lines that were really beautiful and insightful, and the structure of it and actually the drama and the pacing was all off because I didn't know as much about structuring a book. And so it's almost like I kept the major beats, but the way I think about it is instead of it being almost like a metronome of beats, it's more like an orchestra. Like I have a lot more going on, a lot more character development, a lot more plot, and just was able to fill in so that it's not an outline of a book. It's an actual book. But yeah, I would have been embarrassed if that were on shows
I swear, yeah,
for sure.
everything you're saying, I feel like you're coming into my brain, and you're just speaking to it. This kind of brings me to that second myth where we were talking about, it's a long game. It, this is also not a get rich quick scheme, at least not one that I thought it would be. I thought, oh, you land that one deal, bam, like come on in, money. Into my account.
Yeah.
And when I talk to you and even when I talk to other people and when we start to be honest about it, it becomes very apparent. Like I have made so little money and then I found out you actually still work a full-time job.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And again, I think just because I always have such I don't want to say low expectations. I like to be pleasantly surprised. And I have been an artist before. You and I have shared that we're both dancers. And dance was something, obviously, I think everybody knows you don't get rich quick in dance. That is the surefire way to not make a lot of money. And because I did that, I really chose to do another career that I love, and it's an amazing opportunity. I'm fully invested in it, but I did find out early that you're never going to fall in love with a job just because it makes you money, but it's very easy to resent something that you once loved if it makes you no money and you actually can't support yourself. And so I went into writing books with I'm going to write a book because I love books, because I love writing, and never really set up with the expectation of, oh, this is going to be a money making scheme. I think for me, getting published was really about being part of the conversation of other authors. It was about hopefully giving to even one person the level of comfort and excitement and that world opening that books have done for me. But then, obviously I learned very quickly that that was probably the right approach because writing, there are people that hit the jackpot. There are really big deals you see, but I think it's the exception rather than the rule. And I tried to go into it thinking I'm probably not going to be the exception. I'll be the rule. If something happens, like amazing. But um, I even for those big deals, like when we think about, a six-figure deal, some publishers are breaking it down into 4 or 5 payments. And so when you think about like just for actual numbers, say somebody gets $100,000 deal, it's a six-figure deal. It sounds like a lot of money. Broken down maybe between 2 books, that's 50,000 a book. And if those payments are stretched over 3 years, you think about the annual income from that isn't enough. I live in a very high priced area, like one of the highest priced areas in the country. So, and I have 3 kids and going off to college,
Oof.
you know, yes, I have a full time job. And luckily, I love my full time job and it is amazing. But I think there are very few people who go into it, get the big deal where their big deal actually pays off. So then they can get another big deal and then get the movie, adaptation from it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I think a lot of
It's
times
just
people also
rare.
don't say that. It's also rare to earn out when you get such a big deal.
Yes.
That might be all the money you
Very rare.
see for your book for the
Yes.
entire life of it.
Yes. And, unfortunately, even if you get a smaller deal,
That might be
because,
it.
yeah, because I think in a lot of ways, it's a gamble, right? Like the publishers are taking a chance on what the readers are going to want to buy. And they have limited marketing dollars. So they're going to put their marketing dollars where they think a book is going to pay off. And so, I think there's a challenge. And this is, most of this is just from, what I hear from others. But if you get a big deal, there are some publishers, I think, that will put more marketing behind that because they want to earn back their money. They made a big investment, they're going to invest more. If you have a smaller deal, you may not get the marketing dollars from the publisher, and then it's harder to get your name out there. So I think, when it comes down to it, this is art. And we're hoping and trying to make it a science and trying to make it all make sense. But sometimes you hit the zeitgeist, sometimes you don't. And I think it really is, in many ways, a gamble. And I, for one, feel really lucky to have my book out there and to have a chance and to be in there and to keep, the ability to keep writing. But I don't think it's a guarantee for anybody, no matter what size of the deal. If you get a deal, how long you're on in the query trenches, how long you're on submission. It's all a bit of a guessing game about what's going to happen tomorrow.
Absolutely. And, again, I'm so appreciative of you honestly telling everybody about this because these are things that, yeah, they don't get talked about a lot. You see a lot about like how to query and all this kind of like, you know, outside really pretty stuff, but it's like, oof, once you get in though, ooh, get ready. Is there another myth that you have seen that needs to be talked about?
I think I saw, and this was, in the heyday of publishing Twitter, which doesn't exist anymore, unfortunately. But a lot of talk about the difference between indie and traditional publishing, and that the downside to indie publishing is you have to do all your own marketing, and in traditional publishing you don't. But I think those lines are so blurred that it doesn't matter how you're published, you have to be out there. You have to be on social media, you have to be trying to market your book, you have to be present and really be, nobody is going to advocate for your book as well as you are. So you have to be out there and marketing and present to be able to be the best spokesperson for your book and your brand. I was past week like wrapping advanced reader copies to send out to and sort of enlisting my kids to do it, and get them out and at the post office. There's all sorts of things, and being active on social media. I think, there's also the flip side is there's a myth that you need this massive platform to publish a book. And I think that is overstated, though. I think you just need to be present. I had no active social media other than lurking. It was like a big lurker. I saw everything that was going on and learned and used it to learn, but I didn't know how to market myself when I didn't have a book to sell. I was like, what's the point of being in social media? I don't have anything to sell. And so I didn't really get on social media in an external way until I had or close to a book deal. So you can still build it, and mine is really small, but I feel like I found the right people who sort of appreciate the types of books I write, and building slowly with like real authentic relationships. I find it's easy to make strong relationships with people who like the same types of books you like, because it says a lot about your values, what you're interested in, where you seek joy. Like there's a lot of ways to create that connection. I think the myth is that, I see people saying all of one thing, that only indie authors really need to market, which is not true. And I also see the flip side of that is you need, 100,000 followers in order to get a fiction book deal, which is not the truth
Oh, I
either.
really hope
It's
so because I have been off social media for 6 years now. And so I'm like a nobody. And so sometimes I wonder, is that what hurt me? Because I did hear a friend of mine did get feedback from a pass that was like the editor was like, "Well, maybe if you had some kind of platform or something else going on with this." And I'm like, "Yikes." Like is that it kind of feels true these days when you see all the
yeah,
TikTok $1,000,000, book deals
right.
coming off of selling 5 tropes you list on TikTok and then you do the little dance.
I mean, there is some of that. I think there are some publishers that are really looking to invest in personality and then, building the book around that. But it's not every like publisher, and it's not a hard and fast rule. I think it's not going to hurt unless you're incredibly problematic. And then, if
I
you have
worry about that. I drop
presence
a
on
lot of
social media.
F-bombs.
No, no, I don't think F-bombs matter. I drop a lot of F-bombs in my books, actually. I'm waiting for my editor to say, that's too many. What are you doing? First page, what are you doing? So far, they haven't.
Ooh,
I
I
don't
like
know.
that.
I'm knock on wood. I'm not sure. My book that comes out next year, I was like, that might be, I was counting the inappropriate words in the first chapter. It's like,
Can you
um,
share the number?
Yeah, I don't think I wrote it down, but it was somewhere in the neighborhood in the first chapter, the first 10 pages, there was at least one very inappropriate word on every single page. Because it's a dramatic moment. I mean,
I love
it's a
it.
dramatic moment. Like, I'm not giving anything away to this woman who is newly divorced, walks into a cafe and finds her ex-husband that she divorced that week with his pregnant girlfriend, and she is 9 months pregnant.
Oh,
So there's a
yeah.
yeah, it's, like, worthy of a few F-bombs. So, no, but like,
Okay, I love this
problematic,
already.
unkind person, somebody who's not a good literary citizen and knocks other writers or, is just I think it can hurt you. But if you are engaging in the literary space, um, and being supportive and kind and present in the community, having more followers, it's not going to hurt you for sure. But, I know plenty of examples of people who got deals where it's really about the book. And then there are flip side examples where, what was it a couple months ago? That Australian reality star just like posted a TikTok about the books he liked and he got a deal. But I
Wha
think I think those I think
It
I think those
hurts.
are like the big dramatic examples,
Uh,
because it's a
yeah.
business.
No,
Like, we all have to sell books.
well, yeah, we need to
Yeah,
eat.
yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
We're all part of it. And the way I try to think about it in a positive flip side is there is some evidence that those big, big books and big personalities sort of subsidize a lot of the rest of the industry. And so for every book that hits it, huge, you're investing in the industry that then can cultivate new
It
authors.
is
So
so true. I thank
I
Leigh
try
Bardugo
again,
every
like,
day.
yeah, because it is, that it's sort of like a, I don't want to say it's a Ponzi scheme. It's bad, but
Well, hey, I'm glad you said it.
oh, it does take, it's a lot of betting, right? On new authors. It's betting that this particular book is going to hit the moment. It is you're betting on culture, you're betting on both art and also when you think about it, a book that gets sold doesn't necessarily hit the shelves until a year and a half, sometimes 2 years later. So it's a huge gamble. And any book that breaks through, I think is a huge win for the industry and a huge win for authors. The more people when you pick up a book you love, unless it's, the absolute best book you've ever read in your entire life and you have a book hangover, if you pick up a book you love, it encourages you to read more books. So it's a win for everybody, I think, when an author has a lot of success.
Thank you, Mara, so much for coming on and helping me bust these 3 really prevalent myths about publishing. I really hope that people hear this, and I know they're gonna get so much out of this the way that I did. And stay tuned, everybody, because I've got Mara on again for a very, very important question about books and biceps. See you guys next time. Thank you, Mara.
Thank you.